The story of King Solomon and his encounter with the Queen of Sheba begins as a contest of wit and intellect.
They spent days, apparently, just challenging each other with riddles. His riddles seem to be designed to show off his knowledge of the natural world. Her riddles seem to be more seductive and more personal.
Details about this famous love story come not only from the Bible, but also from ancient Hebrew lore and Ethiopian legend.
She's very noble, and when Solomon sees her, he wants her. But he knows, because she's virtuous, that she won't give in to him. So he has to find a way to trick her.
A tale of two strong-willed individuals whose conflict turns into a night of passion. The story of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba has endured for almost 3,000 years. Over 3,000 years ago in Israel, a shepherd boy named David becomes famous by slaying the Philistine giant Goliath. When he finally gains the throne of Israel, King David unifies the country, and under his leadership, Israel becomes a dominant military force. Late one afternoon, as the sun is setting over the capital city of Jerusalem, King David spies a beautiful woman bathing on the roof of her house. Her name is Bathsheba. Overcome by her beauty, David lets his feelings rule his head. He sends for Bathsheba, seduces her, then commands that her husband be sent to the front line in battle, where he is killed. Bathsheba, who is already carrying David's child, marries him. As is the custom in ancient Israelite society, she becomes part of a harem that includes several wives and many children. But there is no doubt that Bathsheba is the king's favorite. The couple are looking forward to the arrival of their child, but as soon as the baby is born, it is seriously ill. David feels deep remorse, sensing that the child's suffering may be a punishment for his role in the death of Bathsheba's husband. The baby dies. The next child born to David and Bathsheba is a son. This time, the baby is healthy and thrives. They name him Solomon.
Solomon is the surviving son of a relationship between David and Bathsheba, a relationship that began, basically, we would have to say, in sin. There was a considerable judgment placed on that relationship, so much so that they lost their first child.
David and Bathsheba never forgive themselves for their first baby's death. This painful memory casts a long shadow over Solomon's childhood.
The union of David and Bathsheba was a very public scandal, and I suspect that it haunted Solomon, even if only in a corner of his psyche, for the rest of his life.
Accounts of his childhood indicate that Solomon may have had a difficult early life. He probably sees very little of his famous father.
David was busy, he was the king of a fledgling empire, and he had many sons, many wives, so the relationship couldn't have been that close.
Solomon and his many brothers and sisters are raised in the privileged environment of the royal court.
Solomon is born with a silver spoon in his mouth. We wonder how much he really knows as a young man about the way people really live. He's been raised by tutors, he's been raised by military men who teach him his battle skills. He's been raised by wise men and by women in the harem.
As a very young child, Solomon is bright and perceptive. His abilities soon make him stand out from his many brothers and sisters.
I imagine Solomon's a very precocious child. Always had all the answers, always knew what the adults didn't know, filled out all the words in the crossword puzzle.
Before Solomon reaches adolescence, King David has already fathered 17 sons. As is the custom in the royal household, the eldest of these boys is the first in line to inherit the throne. Even though Solomon is 10th in the line of succession, his mother, Bathsheba, hopes that he will be the favorite to inherit the throne. She tries to convince David that Solomon is the most suitable of his sons to take up the reins of leadership.
The way that a woman is taken care of after the death of her husband is through the good offices of her son. And this is why we see the mothers in the Hebrew Bible be so fearless in furthering the prospects of their children, especially the boys. Those boys are their future.
One night, in an unguarded moment, David agrees that Solomon shall succeed to the throne.
Whether this was an agreement made on a pillowcase one night or something like that, we sort of get this interesting impression that this was not at all an official discussion. It was one just between David and Bathsheba.
Years pass. David, old and failing, forgets his promise to Bathsheba about bequeathing the crown to Solomon, and many assume that his eldest son, Adonijah, will be the heir to the throne.
It seems that when Bathsheba first goes in to remind David that he had made an oath to her that Solomon would reign after him, Bathsheba indicates that if David doesn't honor that oath, she's worried about her own personal safety and that of Solomon, because it is the case that claimants to the throne have the nasty habit of disappearing.
Despite his mother's fierce determination that he become ruler, it is unclear whether Solomon himself wishes to be king.
One of the most important traits of any ruler is knowing how to use people to get your tasks done for you. And Solomon was very wise in leaving his ascension to the throne in the hands of his mother Bathsheba. And I suspect that this was an instance of his administrative and managerial skills in saying, I'm going to stay out of this. If I leave it in Bathsheba's hands, I'll end up king.
Aware that David's days are numbered, Bathsheba attempts to revive him by sending a beautiful young woman to share his bed.
Bathsheba has to stand by and watch as another young, beautiful woman is ministering to her husband, but she is willing to endure that indignity so that she can ensure that Solomon will succeed to the throne. It must not have been easy for her.
David, too feeble to respond to the girl's advances, shows no sign of recovery. As the old king drifts closer to death, Solomon is aware that the kingdom of Israel and his own future are hanging in the balance. Jerusalem, 960 BC. According to most estimates, Solomon is 12 years old, but his father, King David, is nearing the end of his life. No longer strong enough to rule, David proclaims Solomon as the next king.
Jewish legends have it that Solomon came to the throne very young, about 12 or 13 years old, which is not uncommon if there is no older son, and usually you have some older person, your mother or your uncle or someone stands as regent.
Solomon begins to take on the responsibilities of the throne, while his father lingers in the background. As soon as he becomes king, Solomon is expected to marry. While the Bible does not name his wife, we know that she was the first of many.
I imagine Solomon as a very big, good-looking man, very beautiful looking, very handsome, strong and full-bodied, very sensual, probably terribly attractive to women.
Though now king of Israel, Solomon is still very young and, not surprisingly, feels insecure about his responsibilities as a leader.
His father seemed to be someone who was mature and knew what he was doing and had a path to follow. Whereas Solomon, even though he was already king, felt like a little child.
David's death brings Solomon's reign to a crisis. Taking advantage of this time of grief and uncertainty, Solomon's half-brother, Adonijah, asserts his rank by marrying David's last wife.
Well, Solomon hits the roof because he says, why don't you just ask for my whole kingdom while you're at it? Because from his point of view, for Adonijah to sleep with one of David's wives is for Adonijah to advance his claim to the throne.
Solomon takes decisive action. He commands that Adonijah should be executed and eliminates all others he perceives to be a threat.
Solomon was the child of two calculating and powerful figures. Bathsheba didn't get where she was by innocence and naivete, and David was at times, ruthless and powerful king. And so Solomon saw greatness and all the flaws of greatness up close.
Solomon travels to a sanctuary just outside Jerusalem. There, he offers a sacrifice to God. That night, God appears to ask what it is that he wants.
And Solomon said unto God, I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad. 1 Kings 3:9.
And God replies, bingo, right answer. Because you asked only for wisdom so you'd be a better king, I'm going to give you the gold, the silver, the palace, the brides, all of the things you need to be a great king in addition to the wisdom.
God grants Solomon's request for wisdom, and from all accounts, his legendary insight seems to extend beyond normal human understanding.
It is his request for wisdom that makes him wise, that gives him control over the birds and the beasts, and that in legend gives him control over all of the demons who exist in the ancient world.
Solomon's judgment is soon put to the test. In a scene regarded as one of the most dramatic in the Bible, Solomon is approached by two prostitutes fighting over a newborn baby. Each woman claims the child as her own. Solomon must determine the identity of the real mother.
And the king said, "Bring me a sword." And they brought a sword before the king. And the king said, "Divide the child in two, and give half to the one, half to the other." 1 Kings 3:25.
Before the women's horrified eyes, the baby is lifted into the air. A sword is poised. Solomon shows no emotion, and he orders a soldier to cut the child in two. One of the women lunges forward, crying out for him to stop. She begs Solomon to give the baby to the other woman and spare the child's life.